what kind of problems are we looking at, or what kind of challenges are we looking at when it gets over and above 150? I guess communication is a key one.
Yeah, well, as I said it was about like within 150 you can have a relatively cohesive group and keep track of everybody, and I think you like, obviously we've as a race we can function many times beyond that, but to do that you need to start bringing in like norms and maybe rules or laws. And so like if you're creating an online community, you start to have, well, this is how you behave on here. You can't do this, or you get banned if you go do these actions. But you don't necessarily need that at smaller group sizes. But we can obviously function much bigger than that. But beyond that, you need to start having some rules. But it's funny. I mean, it's funny to think. It's funny, isn't it, to think of like, do you have rules between your close friends or your larger family? Of course you don't, right? You don't need them, but maybe you do when your company gets to that size, or I don't know, if you're organising 150 people to go to a festival.
I feel like when we lot get together with the close friends, there are plenty of rules. They've just been intrinsically created.
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah. They're mainly at certain times of day, though, aren't they? Those rules when they come into play.
Yeah.
I mean, I definitely think like technology has a huge amount to play in this, and it must be just changing it, because it was about brain size, right? Wasn't it? It was about like what can we cope with in our brain, and I feel like I worked with somebody, and he had a really very sensible observation that like the world's complexity has just continued to increase exponentially. Essentially, there's so much going on now. We're interacting with so much every day, and yet our brains have not, and our brains are still at the size of the Neolithic farming communities or the Roman armies, right? But yet there's so much more going on, and so actually it's just really difficult for us to keep up with this massive complexity that we introducing in our world.
Yeah, agreed. It's a good point.
Somehow we do. Somehow, like, because there are people on social media who have 50 million followers, and somehow they manage to sort of communicate with them. Is that their tribe? Is that many? Like Taylor Swift, she'd probably regard her tribe as those 50 million followers.
I don't think it's very two-way there, is it?
Potentially agree. Yeah.
I feel like you're more broadcasting when you're at that level.
Yeah. But it is interesting, because Tommy, you raised, what's the effect of social media on this earlier, and if you've got followers, it's very different. It's a very different kind of conversation. It's a very different relationship that you have with them. I think, like, you might recognise if you spend a bit of time on social media, if you spend a bit of time on social media and have a large following, you might recognise the odd faces that maybe interact with you a lot at a deeper level. That isn't necessarily to say that one is interacting back with them at that same level. So where does that sit? I don't know. It's very different, isn't it now? Looking at this.
I remember when I learned about this round about the time that Facebook was coming out, and it does do some interesting things, because your network at any one time, if you go back to your network at school, your network at university, and your network at your job, naturally sort of change. The people who you are maintaining relationships and spending time. But Facebook does this funny thing of like resurfacing these really old connections and potentially putting them right at the top above the people that you're seeing on a regular basis, week on week. And I don't know if that has potential to expand the number or not. I don't know. I mean, we have a limited amount of time that we can spend and actually interact with, but by, I don't know, things like Strava, right? Like you do a run and it goes up on Strava, and somebody else sees it who's from quite a long way back in your history. Maybe that expands our number.
I guess it's then about how meaningful you interpret that interaction. Mm-hmm. And I think, again, coming back to some research, it was found that younger generations...
to work on your citations,
I really do. I'm so sorry, anybody whose work I am badly quoting or paraphrasing. But research does show that younger generations associate more meaning to online relationships, and so, I guess some even purely online relationships, to older generations, because and I guess you could read into that for a lot of younger generations, life without the internet and without social media has never existed for them.
Yeah.
So while the number might increase, and the potential for that number to increase, what depth, what level are those interactions and relationships at?
Around this time, I was also reading. I remember reading some really interesting research about the likelihood of collaboration within companies, or it wasn't just companies; it was also like academic institutions, like universities, and they did it by distance. So they were like, okay, what's the likelihood of collaborating if you're in the same office? The likelihood of collaborating if you're on the same floor? The likelihood if you're on a same building but different floor, and the likelihood if you're in a different building. And I don't have the numbers in front of me, but the striking thing was it just dropped off, like boom, like, you know, the chances of you collaborating with the person in a different building to you, even if the building was right next door, was might as well have been in a different country.
Wow.
And I was thinking about that research again recently, because I was thinking it's probably changed, like with all of the tools that we have, and how common it is to be able to work remotely, and how well connected you are with people who are not in the same location, but you're seeing them and meeting them and chatting with them every day.
Yes.
And also the tools you have, like even down to like emojis and things like that, to make a bit more of a connection than a formal email back and forth, right?
Yeah.
And you know, now you can send voice memos and video notes and all that, and I just think that's massively changed. But I remember thinking that research at the time was really fascinating to me. It's like, even if you're on the floor below, you might as well not be in the same institution. You know? Like you're not going to collaborate. But that's probably changing, I think.
All music on this podcast series is sourced from the very talented Frank Cinelli. And you can find loads more tracks at frankcinelli.com.